Thank you everyone for being present in our class on time. Hello, Mr. Abdullah. Hello, everyone. I uh, I missed the name of some of you. I skipped the names, I think. Hello to you all. I hope that you and your families are all happy and healthy. If you agree, we can start our today's session first with asking questions about the previous session. We started the Scrum practice, the Scrum process, and started our conversation on activities and artifacts of Scrum. So if there is any question on the about the previous session, please first ask your questions. Mr. Al-Amar, Mr. Al-Amar, for your question about the retrospective. Retrospective itself is a word with meaning to looking backward. In retrospective, we want to look backward. We want to review the process that we are going through in the sprint that is finished, and we want to learn about our about mistakes that we made or about the issues that we have in that sprint, and we want to uh, have better sprints and we want to improve our next sprint, so we can have a better Scrum process. So in sprint retrospective, we want to look back in the sprint that we did in the just finished sprint. We want to learn lessons. We want to check the issues. We want to review our final product. And then we want to improve our next sprint. So each sprint, we want to have a better process. So step by step, sprint by sprint, our team members can improve their process, can improve their own version of the Scrum process. Okay, so in the retrospective, we want to look back. We want to look back to the sprint that we just finished, and we want to learn new lessons. We want to correct our mistakes. We want to improve our process. This is the sprint retrospective. The difference with the sprint review is that in the sprint review, we want to review just the product. We want to review just the product and not the process. Thank you for your good questions, Mr. Al-Amar, Mr. Al-Hajami. Is there any other question? Please ask. If there is any question in your mind, please ask your question. Okay, if you agree, we can start from the. Uh, yes, Mr. Al-Amar. We have three loops. Um, the first one, the biggest one, is the sprint itself, the activity of the sprint. This is the sprint. And also we have the sprint execution. Sprint execution is the activity of developing these tasks. Sprint execution is the activity of developing the tasks from the selected features in the sprint backlog. Yes, a sprint execution. In a sprint execution, the development team, members of the development team, will produce the final product. They will develop the task, they will perform the tasks for these selected features. The smallest loop here is the daily scrum, the meeting that every day will be held, and all the members of the development team will participate in this meeting. A small meeting, a short meeting, about 15 minutes, daily scrum. And the big one is the sprint itself. The sprint includes grooming, planning, execution, and then we have two other activities, review and retrospective. I will give a detailed introduction on all these loops, so don't worry. The previous session we just talked about the backlog and the grooming. All these slides are remained. So in this session we will talk about all these remaining activities and artifacts. Okay, any other question? If there is not any question, we can start the in summary, Scrum is not to be active small, but to be but to take action and produce the product. The the final part of your sentence is correct, Mr. Al-Hajami. In agile processes, we focus on taking actions instead of planning. Thank you for your summary. That was a very good summary. Okay, in the previous session, we talked about the product backlog, which is an ordered list of our features, the features that the product owner has in his or her vision. The product owner do the grooming activity, which includes creating and estimating and also prioritizing the items in the product backlog. Then the developer team will do a planning activity and create the sprint backlog. But the previous session, we just talked about the product backlog and the grooming activity. The previous session, we talked about the product backlog and about the grooming activity. Now we can start with the sprint. The next activity in the Scrum process is a sprint. In Scrum, we have which is an iterative process. We have uh, continuous sprints. We have continuous iteration or continuous cycles. Each iteration or each cycle is called a sprint. Please look at the picture of the sprint, which is indicated by a gray circle. The sprint in the big picture that we have here, the sprint includes all the activities in the Scrum process. So in one sprint, the product owner do the grooming, then the developers do the planning and execution, and then the sprint review and sprint retrospective is done. At the end, we can learn about our sprint, we can feedback on our sprint, and then start a new sprint. So in Scrum, we do the work by iterations. In each iteration is called a sprint, and we can have multiple sprints for developing a product. Sprint number 1, sprint number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. The point is that each sprint is a fixed time box, which is up to a calendar month. So each sprint cannot be longer than 30 days, or better to say about 20, 25, 26 days. All sprints are fixed length. All sprints are the same length. So the start date and the end date of each sprint is always fixed. After doing each sprint, after completing each sprint, the result should provide a tangible value to the customer or the final users of the software. As we said before, sprints are time boxed, so they have always a fixed start and end date. So we cannot change the time of the sprint, the duration of the sprint, or the start or end point of it. And also all the sprints have the same duration. In each sprint, we try not to accept any changes that can alter the goal of our project, or any personal changes. So we try to maintain our goal and also the personnel of each sprint, unless the change is absolutely necessary. But we try to have some stable environment in each sprint. The first activity in the sprint, in each sprint, is the sprint planning. After the product owner creates its product backlog and based on his or her vision, then we can start the sprint. The first activity in the sprint is sprint planning. So in the start of every sprint, we have a sprint planning for that sprint, not for all the process, just for that sprint. In the sprint planning activity, which is done by the development team, The most important subset of the product backlog items, the most important ones, the higher priority items are selected. A subset of the most important items in the product backlog, which is created by the product owner, are selected to be built in the next sprint. So the Scrum team will plan to develop some of the most important features, some of the most important items in the product backlog in each sprint. For planning and selecting the subset of items in the product backlog, the development team can use the help of the product owner, and they both can agree on a sprint goal for that upcoming sprint, for that current sprint. So based on that goal, based on the goal of that sprint, the most important items in the product backlog can be selected to be completed. Those selected items from the product backlog create the sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog includes a subset of the most important items in the product backlog. What is the sprint backlog? Let's see this picture. This picture is a bigger picture of the sprint backlog. You saw this picture here, the sprint backlog, and also in our big picture of the Scrum process here. We have the sprint backlog. After the sprint planning, the outcome is the sprint backlog. So the activity of the sprint planning will be resulted into creating a sprint backlog artifact. Let's have a more detailed look at the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog includes a subset of the most important features or items in the product backlog. And each feature is broken down into a set of tasks that need to be completed for developing that feature. So for each feature, a list of tasks that must be completed are provided in the sprint backlog. For feature A, we have these 3 tasks. For completing feature B, we need to perform these 3 tasks. For completing feature feature C, we have to perform these 2 tasks. And for each task, we need to estimate the required effort. For example, the first feature includes the task, the code the UI, which is estimated to take as long as 5 hours per 5 human per hour. The next task is automate testing, which is estimated to be about 8 hours, and the last task is to create a database schema, which is estimated to take about 6 hours. So a sprint backlog includes a list of the most important features, which is selected from the product backlog. And for each feature, we have a set of tasks that need to be completed to develop that feature. For each task, we also have a time estimation. Okay, Mr. Aliosari. How can the consumers be identified? Consumers, you mean customers? We have customers or end users. The customer is the person or the organization that we have a contract with them. We create the software for them and they will pay us. That's the customer. And for end users, the users and the end users, the customer will tell us who is the end user. And also in the analysis phase, we will try to find out who our users are. Not who, but we need to find out about their profile, in what age the users are, what are the level of their knowledge of the software systems, or etc. Yes, Mr. Azobaidi. The purpose of sprint planning is to find out what should be delivered after this sprint. Yes, the goal of sprint planning is to create the sprint backlog, which is the features that need to be completed in that sprint, the deliverables of that sprint. That's correct. Mr. Al-Amar, I don't understand your question. When does hardening happen? Uh, what do you mean by hardening? Mr. Al-Amar, what is hardening? What do you mean by hardening? Hardening what? I cannot understand your question. Okay, Mr. Azobaidi and Mr. Aliosari, is there anything that we need to talk about? Your question? Thank you, Mr. Azobaidi, for your good question. In sprint backlog, okay, Mr. Al-Emar, the sprint backlog includes a set of features and their tasks. After finding out about the tasks that need to be completed, the development team start to perform those tasks. So the members of our development team will do these tasks, all these tasks. This is a set of tasks, and our the members of our development team will perform all these tasks. We create the sprint backlog to be assured that we have enough time for doing all these tasks in a sprint. We need to finish our sprint in less than 1 month. So we need to know all the tasks and the estimation time, and be assured that we have enough time to do all these tasks. And second, this is like a plan. The sprint backlog is like a more detailed plan for what we should do to complete Okay, excuse me. I had a problem in my connection, and because of that, I was out of the class. Okay, can you hear my voice? Can you hear my voice? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hossain. Thank you. Okay, about the question of Mr. Al-Zubaydi, to create a high quality sprint backlog, we need to have enough experience for creating these subtasks, the set of tasks. We need to have our development team must have enough experience so they can identify the tasks that must be done for each feature. And also we need to have a good estimation. If we estimate the required time in a wrong way, then we may it must be hard for the development team to complete these tasks, and we may run out of time. Okay, Mr. Al-Zubaydi, so the experience for identifying the tasks and also for estimating the required time for each task is important in creating a sprint backlog. Yes, Mr. Al-Hajami. We have about a month for each sprint, so it's not very short period. 1 month is not a short period, and in each sprint we try to maintain our goal and maintain our personnel, and we try to not to have big changes in our project. Okay, so we will limit the cost because we accept the changes, especially between each sprint, and then prevent those changes from being big changes in uh, further steps of our development process. So it's very important to accept the changes in during our between each sprint. Thank you, Mr. Al-Hajami, for your question. The sprint execution is the activity of developing the selected features in the sprint backlog by performing the set of tasks for each feature, for each item. In the sprint execution, the development team members performs all the task level works that are necessary to complete each feature. And also the Scrum Master will coach the development team and motivate them to complete their work. In sprint execution, we need to uh, get the features in the sprint backlog done. And by the word done, we mean it needs it's needed to complete that feature with a good quality. And also we don't want any important task of each feature to left undone. Although in the sprint backlog, we determine the tasks that are need to be completed for each feature, but the order of performing those tasks and the tasks that each team member performs each day can be vary and can depends on the nature of the work. For example, the type of the software that we're building and the hardware that are needed to be included in that project or the marketing work that need to be done uh, are different tasks that can be performed by the development team. As we said before, the development team in the Scrum process should be a self-organizing team, which means that nobody monitor or control the work of team members, and we don't have any plan or any order to do the tasks for each team member. So the members can define their own plan for doing different tasks, and they need to be they need to have a self-organizing manner that can be best for them to achieve the goal of that current sprint. So it's very important to have team members that are motivated and also committed to the tasks that they must be work on. The activity that we do each day in the sprint execution is called daily scrum. So in the sprint execution, we have an activity which is repeated every day. The daily scrum is the activity which is repeated in the sprint execution activity each day of the sprint execution. But what is the daily scrum? The daily scrum is a short time meeting, about 15 minutes or less that is repeated every day, and it's ideally to be at the same time every day. For example, at the 8 in the morning or at the 9 in the morning, and all the team members should participate in that meeting in the daily scrum. The scrum master will facilitate the daily scrum and ask each team member 3 questions for the benefit of the whole team. So every member of the development team should answer these questions. First, what did I accomplish since the last daily scrum? Second, what do I plan to work on by the next daily scrum? Third, what are the obstacles that are preventing me from making progress? By answering these questions, all the team members can have an understanding of the big picture of what is occurring and about how they are progressing toward the sprint goal. And also they can know about the challenges and about the obstacles that every team member is facing, and they can find out about the modifications that they need to make to their plan for the next day work, for the next daily scrum. And if there is any issue, they can understand those issues that need to be addressed. There are some rules about sprint execution. We have some rules for daily Scrum. The rules for the daily Scrum are: first, the daily Scrum is an inspection, synchronization, and adaptive daily planning activity. So we need to inspect the work of each team member, synchronize the work that is done by different team members, and adapt the plan for the next day. And the daily Scrum is going to help to have a self-organizing team and to help the team members to do their job better. The next rule is that the daily Scrum is not a problem-solving activity. So if you face an obstacle, a problem in your work as a team member, and you can tell that obstacle to other team members in the daily Scrum, but you cannot overcome that obstacle, and you can solve that problem in the daily Scrum. After that, you told other team members about your problem. Then after the Scrum, after the daily Scrum, at the end of the day, you can talk to a smaller group of interested people, for example, about 2 or 3 members of the team that can help you to solve your problem. And so in the daily Scrum, you only talk about your obstacle, talk about your problem, and try to find people that in the development team that can help you to solve your problem. The next rule is that the daily Scrum is not a traditional status meeting. Uh, mm, Almost everybody in the Scrum team have the same status, so and we don't have the hierarchical structure that we have in other teams in the Scrum. So the daily Scrum is not a status meeting, and the members don't give reports on how they work. The next rule is that at the daily Scrum, only the most important person talk, and members talk, and others can just be as observers in the meeting. Okay, let's go to the questions. First, Mr. Hossein. Mr. Hossein or Miss Hossein, excuse me if I let me check. Okay, about the question that Mr. Hossein asked, do we build software and what kind of software? Okay, about that sentence. Okay, Mr. Hossein. In a software project, we have different activities. We have coding or building software, and also sometimes we have different hardware that we must work with them. For example, we have some sensors, or if we want to create a software for um, employees in a factory, we need to work with the hardware that read the fingerprint of our employers. So we need to work with hardware, and also in some software, when we try to develop the software, we need to work with some marketing businesses. For example, if we have an online market, if we have an online uh, shopping site, then we need to do some marketing businesses too. So yes, we have different tasks for each feature. Okay, Mr. Hossein? And about the question of Mr. Azobaidi, the aim of this meeting is to help the team achieve the sprint goal faster. Yes, it is. Yes, for a 2 week sprint, it usually lasts for 8 to 10 days. Yes, we can have sprints that are less than 1 month, but it's better to have enough time for each sprint, not a very short sprint and not a very long sprint. So in different sprints, we have daily scrums because daily scrums can help team members to be synchronized with each other. This meeting can help everybody to be synchronized with other team members. Okay, Mr. Zubaidi? The fourth step, Mr. Zubaid, it means that we don't have enough time for all the team members to talk. Okay, because of that maybe sometimes we have the most important ones to talk and other can be just observers. Okay, Mr. Zovaid? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Zovaid. Thank you, Mr. Azobaidi. Thank you, Mr. Hossein, for your good questions. If there is any other question, please let me know. Yes, Mr. Ali Yasseri. The daily scrum is usually done in the morning, and usually the people are drinking their coffee. And as they are drinking their coffee, they get together to have a daily scrum. And that meeting is just to know what every other team members are doing, and if we need to be synchronized with each other, if different team members need to be synchronized to each other, they can know that. And if some of them need to adapt their work to the work of other people, then they will know that. Yes, Mr. Ali Yasser, it's all about the development in the execution. We just do the daily scrum in the sprint execution. Okay, so in the planning, we don't have the daily scrum, or in the review, we don't have the daily scrum. Only in the development, the execution, sprint execution, we have the daily scrum. Okay, any other question? Okay, we can continue. The pigs and the chickens in the fourth rule are the words that are used that are used in the agile methodology that can help us to know the important persons that should be in the meeting and the persons that just cannot be can be observers. So the persons that have the responsibility are the pigs, and the person that do not have the responsibility but can attend the daily scrum or the chicken. At the end of the sprint execution, the result is a potentially shippable product increment. So the result of the sprint execution, the product that is produced in the sprint execution, is a new increment of our product, the new increment of our software, which is potentially shippable. Uh, this is the phrase that we use to refer to the result of the sprint, to the product of a sprint. And by the potentially shippable, we just mean that the result, the final, the increment is complete enough that the produced increment is complete enough that can be released to the end users. And about the completeness of that product, the Scrum team can agree on the definition of completeness, the definition of being done for each increment of our sprint. So we use the phrase potentially shippable, but we don't mean that it should actually be shipped to the users, because we cannot. Uh, Sometimes we don't want to release each increment that is created after each sprint. The release or the shipping is also a business decision. It's not always about the technical work that we done. So it may be technically a new increment, but the team may decide not to release, not to ship that increment, because shipping is a business decision, and different factors can influence this decision. For example, if we have enough features in this increment or not, and also if our customer can absorb another change that is given in the last release. So different factors can affect the decision of shipping. But by this phrase, we mean that our product is complete enough, that is done. So potentially shippable is can be accepted as a state of confidence that we do the work, and then there is not any important part of the work that is left undone. After the execution of the sprint, we have the activity of sprint review and sprint retrospective. Let's get back to the big picture to see these activities. We have the sprint review and the sprint retrospective here. So after first planning the sprint and creating the sprint backlog and executing the sprint for about a month, which includes daily scrums each day, and as a result, creating a potentially shippable product increment. We are done, or we already created our product, and we can start a new sprint. But before that, we have two other activities left, which are sprint review and sprint retrospective. But what are these two activities? Before going to the details of these activities, please have a look at the picture of these two activities. They have a similar picture, which includes inspect and adapt. Inspect and adapt. So the sprint review and the sprint retrospective, both of them have the inspection activity and the adaptation activity. Inspect and adapt. So what are the differences? Let's go to the details of these two activities. Both of these two activities include inspection and adaptation activity, but on different artifacts. Excuse me. The sprint review is the activity which includes inspect and adapt on the product, while the sprint retrospective includes inspect and adapt the Scrum process. So both of them are inspection and adaptation activities, but the sprint retrospective inspect and adapt the Scrum process, while the sprint review inspect and adapt the product. The participants in these meetings are also different. In the sprint review, we can have the Scrum team and also some of the stakeholders, some of the sponsors, customers, and we can also have some external interested members, some interested people from outside the team, because we want to inspect and adapt the product. For example, we can use the help of some external advisors that can guide us to have a high quality product, to revise our product. But in the sprint retrospective, the goal is to inspect and adapt the process. So only the people that are involved in the process can attend the sprint retrospective, which includes the development team, the scrum master, and also the product owner. So in the sprint retrospective meeting, only the development team members, the scrum master, and the product owner uh, can participate and have a meeting to discuss what is not working for them with their Scrum process, and if they have any issue with the Scrum process, they can have a discussion uh, to overcome those issues. In the sprint review, the conversation of the meeting is focused on reviewing just the features that are completed in recent sprint, the features that are completed in the current sprint that we are in, the sprint that is just finishing. So the participants in a sprint review meeting try to review the features that are developed in the recent uh, sprint in the context of the overall development effort. In the sprint review meeting, each one of the participants and attendants should get a clear visibility into what is occurring and also needs to have an opportunity to help the team and guide the team for the next sprint for the forthcoming development work. So it's very important to get information to the participants and also let them help and guide the development process, the next sprint, the next iteration. Therefore, we have a bidirectional information flow. First, the development team should inform the people who are not on the Scrum team and get them to sync up on the development effort and let them know about the process and about the features about the product, and also those participants can have the opportunity to help the team and guide the team, use their experience to guide the development team. And also sometimes the Scrum team members can gain a deeper appreciation for the business and or marketing side of their product, especially if the product has a big effect on the business goals of if the software or that product have a big effect on the business parts, on the success of the business of that organization, for example, then the Scrum team members can be appreciated for their involvement, for their results. In the sprint retrospective, the focus is on the improvement of the process. So the team members, the development team members with the Scrum Master and the product owner can have a conversation on the issues or the improvements that the issues that they have and the improvements that they can make to their process, the Scrum, the version of the Scrum process that they have in their team, and they need to work on that process and improve it for the next sprint. Excuse me for my bad voice and for coughing in the class. Thank you, Mr. Zoraid. Yes, Mr. Al Amar. Thank you, Mr. Al Amar. Thank you, Mr. Al Yosef, for your questions. Okay, if you do not have any other question, we can continue these remaining slides and then we can go to the next slide.